And welcome back to part 16 of Final Fantasy XII, where today we're going to be working our way towards the Garif by working our way through XII Plains and then the Osman Plains. Both of which pretty wide area with a fair amount of forestry. Which you might be sitting there going, huh? What's he on about? The XII Plains was a desert last time you went through it. Well, no, it's a different season. The plot introduces it, and well, to be Barsh introduced it last part during the cutscene. It is now in the rains season. So the XII Plains has been entirely flooded out, but natural things can grow. There's also unique enemies here that weren't here beforehand that are far stronger, so it's a good thing the XII Plains couldn't be flooded out before then, because otherwise you'd be screwed. In the main adventure, it will remain flooded until you've done this arc of the story per se. I will mention again when you've passed it and when it can go back to being desert. But once it goes back to being the desert, it will go on to a 2-hour rotation. Every 2 hours it will change from the floodings to the dry and back, and so. If you go to the outpost camp that was here, you can now pick up regen in the farm. Which is a great spell to have because, you know, as the name suggests, cast regeneration, so you'll slowly be regaining health instead of just sitting at a stalemate. There's also a crocodile, which is a great name by the way, that you can pick up. The crocodile will only be here during the rains, so do it now. And the gill snapper is also here. And the gill snapper you're going to see me kinda leave alone for now. I'm gonna access the area required to get to it, but I'm not gonna be fighting it now, and instead we'll be returning to take it on when it's more suitable to do so, but before this arc of the story ends and it goes into rotation. I wanted to get as much of the rains based stuff done whilst it was always going to be the rains, and then leave what's left until afterwards. The only thing of real notice to make is that if you do manage to take down the gill snapper, you will not be able to turn it in right now, and it won't be for a while because of the plot. It will remain, like I said, it will remain like this until the current arc is done. And to give in the quest, it says give it in when it's no longer the rains. You have to give it in when it's dry. There's also a non-hostile enemy called the Woolly Gator that is here that we just took down. Despite being a passive enemy, it's nowhere near as strong as some of the other passives that you can take on. And at some point, I do intend on going back and hunting down the more powerful than I enemies that we've had to avoid in the past. Whether it be the sword guys on the dry XII Plains, the fucking dinosaur in the Ester Sands, or those birds in the Wester Sands. Well, I say that, I can actually take down the birds in the Wester Sands. As of this recording, I've taken down several of them. These are the trees you're looking for, by the way. There's one in each zone of the map. And every time you knock one down, it will flow down the river towards a bridge in the bottom right corner. That bridge will allow you to get to the area which the gill snapper is waiting for you. As I said, there's one in every single area, so don't think it's like 4 or 5. You do need to go to every single bit. There's even one at the outpost in the middle, and one in where we started that I just ran past because I wanted to start off the quest and kind of just explore the area first, like get my bearings before I start going for it. And thankfully it doesn't take that long to get my bearings and start going for it anyway. Oh, and brace yourself, because I got jump scared in my recording of the crocodiles just fucking appearing. Look at him. Yeah, it was a necessary evil to kind of punch him in the face there. And that is how, assuming it goes down well, how I kind of plan to handle using quickenings in the future. Just cut to either one specific attack if we haven't seen it before. If we have seen them all before, I'll probably do Barsh's triple punch just because I love that animation. And if there is a finisher for it, show off the finisher. I didn't get a finisher for that one because the combo didn't go on long enough. Or I just got unlucky, I'm really not sure what determines it. So I just kept it in, but it was still enough to kill the thing, so I didn't worry too much about it. I also try and use quickenings on the gill snapper because I was going to try and take it on now once I set up the arena, but it didn't work. I did like a fifth of its health and it just rinsed everyone. But here's your second one. Like I said, one in each zone. I'm going to be saying that a lot because we are going to be accessing the path, well, opening the path to the gill snapper whilst we're here now, so we only need to worry about doing it later on. Because if you talk to Nanu here, these two will tell you about the gill snapper, but afterwards they will leave here and they will go into hiding because the rains is so much more dangerous than during the normal time. So they will go into hiding and will not return until it goes into dry. So if you take down the gill snapper, you won't be able to report it back then and there. You'll have to wait until after you've done this arc of the story and come back to do it. And there is kind of a little minor subplot, like there is of a lot of the elite hunts, that these two are bickering because the reason why the gill snapper's there, they think it's each other's fault. And the kid's just kind of having to take the blame until he can prove it isn't his fault. But it's like I say, it's only a small little sub story you get with the elite hunts, just to kind of freshen them up a bit. But this is the first elite hunt, as mentioned last time, where you actually get assistance with it. When you're in the area of the gill snapper, someone from the clan will also be there waiting for you to help fight along with your side. But they don't count as a guest character, they're just an NPC as far as you care. Meaning they will be nowhere near as strong, they won't level up with you, and if they're defeated they will just vanish. You can't bring them back or anything, they will just vanish like every enemy. They will only respawn if you leave and re-enter. After a quick edit of the save, let's continue our journey of exploring the XII before we go into the Osman Plain. The bridge in question is dead ahead of where we currently are. The other thing worth mentioning is that there are 2 elementals that can spawn in this map, depending on whether there's a light rain or a heavy rain. If there is a light rain, a small elemental will be around that will be slightly too powerful for you, but if it hits you, you'll be able to get away from. But if it's heavy rain, a far bigger one will be in the arena, and it will massacre you. Like, don't even risk it. Every elemental, well, almost every elemental is passive at first meeting, so they won't engage with you unless you either attack it or attack something nearby to it. So just stay clear of them. If you happen to piss one off, hold down R2 and flee the scene. The gill snapper himself, when we do open it up, will not appear until it's the heaviest possible condition of rain. And it's one of something that starts to happen a couple times with the elite hunts. There's another one later on called the Trickster, which we'll get to when we get to, where when you enter it, it will say it can be in this land, but you won't be able to find it anywhere. But if you keep on leaving and re-entering, eventually the NPC that's accompanying you will say, oh, I think this is the right weather for it. And then when you wander around, you'll find it quite quickly. So Varn can equip the green beret. I still equip the characters I'm not using with better stuff, just, you know, to help boost their chances of a runaway if I get completely ambushed. And I am kind of debating at some point off screen grinding them up to just a more sensible level. Not a high level, but just a more sensible one, so then if I do need to retreat, they have more of a chance of getting away. The only thing that's kind of making me hesitant is that if I were to do it, I'd want to try and get free of the double XP amulets, and I've only got one of them. And secondly, everyone would get license points for it, so even my main 3 would get a lot of unnecessary grinding, and that's not what I want to do on this run through. It's the same as when I was going through Final Fantasy 15, when I went through Neptunia Veer and Death End Request. I don't like being over leveled. However, in Final Fantasy 12, it's the hardest to avoid that if you want to show off everything, which I do. Because I want to show off everything as soon as I can, I'm naturally going to end up far stronger, because far more things are going to end up in my path. And because you can't avoid encounters without holding down R2 and just completely booking past it and getting pot shots thrown at you, I'd rather just take the encounter of every enemy I go past. Also, the frog monsters, same with the cockatrice, but the normal frog monsters, whether it be gigatoads or otherwise, are weird with their spawning. Like, they only ever seem to spawn at you when they're at point blank, which is fine when you adjust to it, but if you're really not expecting it, they can make you jump. There's the weaker version of the elemental over there, by the way, which is why it's smaller. Like, we saw one in the Wester Sands forever ago during a sandstorm that was far bigger than that one, but this one, it's a storm elemental, so it'll be weak to ice, and it only has protect on it, but it's also got 15,000 HP, which is why I said be careful when you're around it. So I kind of just try and deal the enemies around and pay attention to what happens, kind of thing, to see if we stand a chance. Realise that we're doing 0 damage to it. Have a moment of, well, we need to get out of here then. Try and organise what I want to do, like collect my thoughts on how we're going to handle it. So I think I'll even throw a blizzard at it just to see how much damage it does. Not that it means that much, because as I said before, and I'll recommend again to you, move away. Just get away from them. Don't bother with the elementals for a very long time. There will be a time and a place, if you're going for the bestiary, that you can go back through them all and take them all down one by one, working out what makes each one tick, because some of them are mean. Some of them can only be hurt by magic that start with reflect and things like that. But now we're in trouble. So I get Balfir to run the hell out of there, even if he gets silenced in the process. And I mean hard run out of there. Well, I get him to hit the withered tree whilst we're here though, just so we can add to it. Because that's going to start flowing down south, downstream. As long as you make enough distance, it kind of leaves you alone, thankfully. But it's still a pain. So get to the next zone, and then let everyone kind of recuperate. Swap back to Barsh, because he's my main. Get the Echo Herbs on both Balfir and Ash, so then they can do what they need to do. And breathe again. From this point onwards, I decide to do little cuts of me finding each tree that we need to find, just to save time, since we've already been to every area and I can show you what ones we've been missing. Like there's this one in like the centre-ish of the map, just underneath the outpost. There's two pretty close to each other, one in the northern area and one at the outpost, so you might as well just get both in one flow. Like just hit this one, then push down. And I think that's the last main one that we need to get. Because over at the outpost, you can just see it in the corner. I report in this, the crocodiles defeat though, so we can get the rewards for it while we're here. Getting our serpent rod, a teleport stone, and 1200 gil, not too bad. And he says take the ring to his beloved, but I don't know where, or what that is. Like when the dry storm comes around. When the dry season, sorry, comes around again, I spend the time to talk to everyone to try and find where that leads, and no one knows where the ring is or where it comes from. That being said, I haven't actually tried the old lady. I'll try and talk back to her, but we're talking a few parts. There's going to be a random point coming up then, and we're talking like 7 or 8 parts from now, where I'm just going to randomly go back and say, oh, there he is. This is what I'm on about though. Bansai, I don't know if it's Bansat or Banzai, but I'll just call him Banzai, will also be waiting for you here in this area. The gill snapper can spawn here, but these giant turtles that are stronger than the ones you're used to can also be here. The silicon tortoise. They are level 37, but unlike the elementals that are 10 levels lower than them, these guys are actually still manageable. They're just difficult. But you'll notice one of our 3 attackers is doing 0 damage constantly. But our 1 extra, they get the Banzai, he will help us out through here. And he will remain here, but you might have noticed when we first talked to him, he said, oh, the gill snapper's not here yet. Because you only spawn in the worst weather. If you keep on leaving the screen and re-entering it, eventually Banzai will stop you and say, oh, I think the gill snapper's here now. So you don't actually have to really pay attention to it. Like, you don't need to go in and look around. You just keep on entering and leaving until the AI buddy tells you it's here. And the same thing will apply to several other hunts, including one called the Trickster, which will be coming up later on. And I mentioned the Trickster earlier, and I'm mentioning it again because that's where I've got to, or just got past my recording. I've yet to kill the thing, because it's got a really evil thing it does in the last 10th of it that you have to adjust to, which I haven't dealt with yet. I want to be just a bit stronger before I deal with it, just because then I can deal with it more constantly for you guys watching. But yeah, I'm far ahead yet. You're gonna see me like slowly work my way around and take on all the silicon tortoises, or at least a few of them. Or do I run away from this one? No, I just run past it. But I also try my hardest to loot the entire zone, because there's this urn over here as well that you want to get. Because it obtained the Feather of the Flock, which is a key item, I think. Yeah, a legendary cockatrice feather with the brilliant white sheen. Touching the feather, you draw a strange bond with the cockatrices. I'm not 100% sure what that actually does. I'll have to look it up. Actually, I can do that now if I just pause my voice recording and make it sound seamless. Ooh! According to the Final Fantasy wiki, it's part of a side quest that we can't do yet. One that only truly becomes available much later in the game, where you essentially have cockatrices that have run away and you need to go collect them. Some of them don't require the feather of the flock, while some of them do, to convince to go with you. Getting them all, well, getting them individually get you different rewards as you go, like getting the Koga Blade, a Platinum Dagger, the Yochi Bow, the Defender, which is actually pretty solid, so that's quite nice, the Tumulus, the Deathbringer, which is a sword that has a chance to cast instant death, but as you can imagine doesn't work on everything. And once you've done it all, you get a reward for your trouble as well. Return to a cockatrice to receive 2 high ethers. That's quite nice. Could have been like a mega elixir though, because it's a bit long-winded reading through it. So yeah, that's what it's for. So I guess it is worth picking up, because then you're skipping a step in the side quest and not having to try and find it later on after you've heard about it. And you can only do it during the dry season anyway, even though the feather of the flock can only be found during the wet season because it's in a zone you can't get to. So, whatever. But that being said, once we've done everything, we are now in the new area, the Osman Plains, and these zoo are going to be everywhere, and it's going to bully you a lot, but don't worry too much about them, because you're at a point where you can deal with them with relative ease. You're going to see Balfir literally snipe the thing out the sky, which is pretty cool. Now this area I have a lot more memories of, mostly because this is the first area where you can get access to chocobos. At least as far as I'm aware, it's the first area you can get access to chocobos. A series staple of a rideable companion that will allow you to run past encounters and move around a lot faster than normal. It's also how you get access to secret areas. There'll be parts where you'll see chocobo tracks in like thick grass that you just can't pass through. Only the chocobo can go through it. We won't be riding the chocobo this part, we'll be exploring it out. But the reason why I have a lot of memories here isn't just because of that, it's because I overanalyzed and ended up getting a little stuck here. I could see the chocobo tracks, and instead of going to visit the Garif straight away, I assumed, because there are actual wild chocobos around, you could convince one of them in some way to be able to ride, like in the older games. Like where you had to give them a Gashal Green, and from there you could then like earn their trust to ride them, which isn't the case at all. The chocobos that are wild, unless you can outright talk to them, they're just enemies. There's nothing more to it. You just deal with them, because there are black chocobos near the actual like area that where the Garif is staying, and there are some other chocobos you could just find naturally if you wander around, but all of them are wild and will just attack you, and that's it. If you want to ride a chocobo, you have to get a pre-tamed one and purchase it for a set amount of gil at outposts or shops. But so on my first playthrough, I overanalyzed it because I'm used to the older Final Fantasies where you got to convince them with Gashal Greens. Whether it be literally finding a chocobo den, giving one up like out of Final Fantasy IV, or having to convince them to trust you like dealing with the enemies whilst keeping them calm, say like in Final Fantasy VII. Which, speaking of, and now I guess now is as good a time as any to talk about my experience with the demo, since everyone's sharing their thoughts on it, and well, I'm nostalgic as hell for it, so I have stuff to say on it. I love the detail. There's a lot of little things about the detail that I really enjoy, and the gameplay seems really fun, but I want to spend more time with it because it's more technical than I first expected it to be. Like, it's fun on a casual level, but there are more technicalities beyond it, which really surprised me because Square Enix and more technical games hasn't been a thing for a while. Like, as much as I love 15, with the exception of Armageddon Unleashed, 15 wasn't technical really at all. And so it's quite refreshing to see it be, but because of it I need to adjust to it. But it does seem pretty fun. Like, even though at first it felt a little slow to use, it's just because I'm inexperienced. Because I've seen people who have used it a lot more and spent more time with it really gets like their mojo going and crank up the speed for it. And it's fascinating to see in action, and I want to learn and get quicker with it because it's just fun. And so all in all, I am thoroughly enjoying it. The only thing I'm concerned about is how they're going to end it. Like, we know they're splitting it part for part. It's not going to be the entirety of the original 7, and to be honest, the people that are complaining about it I think need to calm down a little bit. I can get that it is a bit annoying that it's not the full experience of the original, but if you look at how much they're expanding it, also keeping in mind the original PS1 game had pre-rendered backgrounds and was still 3 discs big, what the hell were you expecting to happen? If it's costed them 100 gigabytes of data space and you won't even be able to access the overworld, what were you actually expecting the game to be? Like, to me, I feel like people were setting themselves up for disappointment, expecting it to be the full package in one go. The fact that they decided to split it like this so they can give more time, detail and attention to the actual moments of the game to help make it the best it can be in the long run. If they didn't do that, I'd be more worried. If they said we're going to do the whole game, I would be more concerned, because I wouldn't see how they'd be able to do it in the way they're trying to do it, without just doing a HD makeover but it still being the same old game. Which is what they could have easily done, but they knew what the fans wanted, so they made sure to do it properly. So I wholeheartedly am perfectly fine with it. I don't see it as episodic like some people have seen it is. Like, I wouldn't say it's episodic. It's not how they're trying to go with it. It's not like a fucking Telltale game where it's going to take us 2 hours. It's going to be a 50 to 60 hour beast of a game that just happens to all take place in Midgar. It's going to have its own beginning, middle, and end, because if you remember in the original, Midgar had its own story arc that it had to go through, so they'll just expand on that heavily, probably move a few things around for better context and understanding, so there aren't so many things left at mystery by the time you finish Midgar, and probably add a couple, like some extra bosses here, there, and everywhere to help spice it out a little bit more. And I can imagine they'll change the last boss of Midgar, because if it has to end on fighting that thing at the end of the runway on the motorbike, that would be a little bit lackluster. I doubt they will do it that way. I think they'll add something extra. Probably fighting Genova or something, because originally you didn't fight Genova until the ship heading across land. You know, when you left the base of the giant cannon on it. I haven't played 7 in a little while, so the names elude me right this second. But you fight Genova on the ship, where you find Sephiroth when you're heading to, like, Costa del Sol. So the fact that we've seen Genova in the trailers makes me think that maybe Genova's been moved, or maybe they just added extra fights, because that's always possible. Genova's split into so many parts. I can easily see like Genova getting squeezed into fighting during Shinra HQ when you're climbing the tower, because you see Genova in the cell, like her more natural looking form, whilst her more monstrous forms escape afterwards. Or her monstrous extensions of her escape afterwards. So making it so you just find and fight a monstrous extension of her in Shinra HQ, probably when you're trying to escape later on, instead of just later on kind of thing, makes sense for more of a climactic finale. Because fighting Genova as a final boss, which I don't think it will be the final boss, because I've got a feeling they wouldn't show that in a trailer if that was the case. But they might do, because Square and revealing too much is a bit of a trend for them. Remember the Kingdom Hearts 3 trailers? But either way, I think it's going to be fantastic. I probably won't let's play it as soon as it comes out. Like, same with Death End 2, as much as I want to. When they come out, I'll want to play them for me first. Maybe do a couple playthroughs, maybe like give them a bit of breathing room, experiment with a few ideas, then come back to them later on and do them with more fleshed out stuff. The only game where it's likely for me to do it relatively soon after my first playthrough is Death End 2, because even though I never properly made a promise per se, I feel like it's kind of an unspoken promise now that I got to do it, regardless of it. But by the way, there's your last proper entrance to the XII caverns that I was on about. You know, the one that went all across the Western Sands and both the Sand Seas that I said is so gargantuan it even expands beyond the XII Plains? Well, there is what I meant. And the XII caverns is where I'll be entering it properly when I go to explore it. Because after we do this story arc, I decide to sidetrack a little bit before moving on to the next story arc of the game, and get a lot of optional things done that we can at the time, one of them being the caverns. Not everything though. I am reasonable, because some of it I'm aware, even when I get to it, I'm under-leveled for. And so I kind of take it cautiously, and we're not, like, in my recording, I've done the boss fight of XII caverns now. And I've explored all but one room. There's one room that has a unique enemy type in there that just wiped the floor with me. Like, ridiculously, unapologetically destroyed me. So there's any extra loot in there I'll be returning to later on. So I've made sure to make a note of it that I will be returning to it at some point. Not that I'll get much luck out of it, but I will be returning to it. And that's assuming there is any unique loot in it. It could have just been a room that happened to have stronger mooks. These little bunny guys you can take down as well if you want to add them to the bestiary. You see me kind of leave them alone most of the time because they're really not worth the fight. Like, they're so weak and drop so little experience. Like, once you've added them to the bestiary, you might as well just leave them alone. But there are also Zangnal here that you can take down, which are a bit more powerful, but they're not like the ones you could find in the original Giza Plains that you had to avoid that had the big sword. They're far more forgiving. If you decide to keep on deterring over to the east, you will find a save point that goes into a jungle that you don't need to be in right now. We'll be going into that jungle very soon, and if you want to explore it now, you can do. You just won't get that far because there's a barrier, and the barrier won't move until you do a certain part of the story, and that certain part of the story won't become available until you actually follow the main path. That's the chocobo tracks I was on about. You need a chocobo to transfer through there to go to a secret area that leads to a dungeon called the Hen Mines, which the Hen Mines will be exploring out for the most part when we get there. Also, what happened to this guy? Sup? Game Hunter. Traveller, you're also good for the Osman Plains, got exhausted. Which way you hinted to Jahara? Oh, it's the other direction. So if you come here early, you can be alerted to that you're going the wrong way, you need to go the other way. So cutting back to areas we haven't been to, there is a random Garif adventurer around the area that joins as an ally, and they're supposed to be allies, but I don't know what I did, but for some reason I pissed him off and he started fighting me, so he had to die. That was the end of it. But every other one we're going to meet in the future do help out, because by nature the Garif are actually quite helpful. I have no idea what I did to wind him up to get him to target me. Maybe it was an area of effect spell that happened to catch him or something, I don't know. They're supposed to be helpful NPCs that can even buff you and help you out, and that one just attacked me. Which makes me wonder if the other helpful NPCs you can find around the place, like the one in Giza Plains, like when it's dry, you can also convince to attack you if you do certain things. But there is another mark that you can get done here, but to get access to it, I don't think I do it now, I think I'll come back to it later. To get access to it, you need to kill every single enemy in the area, leave and then come back, because it's another timid-based enemy. Timid-based hunts are probably the ones that are the easiest to deal with, but also can have one of the most frustrating things in the world. There's one particular timid hunt that if you've played the game and tried to 100% it, you know about. That is an absolute bastard. And literally everyone hates it, because the area is gargantuan and there's like a really strong storm going on, so it's difficult to see. And if you miss just one enemy, the thing won't spawn. And it's also a pretty difficult hunt on its own, so when you finally get everything done, like cut through and zone through every single area, and then the thing just kicks your ass because you didn't realise how underprepared you really were, so how many resources you just wasted grinding through literally everything in the area. But I'll save that complaint for later. There are things that I really don't enjoy about this game. I love this game for the most part, but there are things that I really don't enjoy, and I'll happily bring them up as and when. The main one being the over-the-top scale, which I already mentioned when we was going through the Sand Sea, that sometimes in some areas drag on. And we haven't even got anywhere near the worst of it. There's some areas later in the game that are way too big for their own good. Sorry, my throat died for a second there. But I said, what's another thing? Like, we'll get to them when we get to them. Like, there's two in particular that stick out as examples to me, and like I said, if you played it before, you already know what I'm talking about. But we'll get to them when we get to them. I still kind of enjoy one of them, and the other one, like, even though I'm still very far away from either of them in my recording. One of them I already know exactly what I'm going to do when I get to it, and that's do it later on. There's one of them where it's like, the later one that I'm referring to is one of the very last areas of the game, and it's also the very last area that you have a guest character with you. And because you're that late on, most of the side stuff is available to you. So when I get to that area, I'm going to take the guest with me and deter. See, this one's actually being helpful. Like, this one isn't trying to attack me in any way, shape or form. And so I really don't know why the other one attacked me. But when I get to it, so I keep on going off track, I'll be taking that guest with me and doing a lot of side stuff, because then we can have a full party of 4, and the guest is actually pretty strong. We are actually pretty close to having another guest character join us though, and they actually join us for a fairly long time as well, so you kind of get used to having them in your team, making it feel more awkward when they eventually leave and you're back down the 3. You're like, oh, okay. But that being said, we're now in the land of the Garif, Jahara. And it's where we'll be talking and finding how we can try and restore the Dawn Shard next time. So when you're ready, talk to them, but I'm going to go to the crystal because I'm going to finish this recording. So see you next time.